fun with style, off-meta gameplay and builds.
Hey everybody, welcome to Grimsforge Gaming. Today we are going to do episode number 1 of our PvP boot camp. And the goal of this video is to try and help educate, help inform, and maybe even guide some people to some PvP training with us. So let's jump into it. The first thing, I've been training PvPers for over 4 years now. Okay, it doesn't matter really what faction they're on, and I've leveled over 300 characters. Pretty much every possible play style, weapon combination, class, everything. You name it, I've done it, and that's been because of my thematic builds on my YouTube channel, right? And so anyways, through the evolution of ESO, I've got a lot of experience on how to play all these off-meta weird play styles, as well as meta. And so anyways, we're going to jump into the very first thing that I run into in my PvP training with people is I get this message, and this is the same message from 3 years, 4 years ago if you've seen any of my videos then. It's people that will come to me looking for training, and they'll say, I've been PvPing for 4 years, and every time I run into a 1v1, I still lose, and it's extremely frustrating. And so, if you're one of those people that wish that you would do better in a 1v1 or even a 1v2 scenario, you might want to look at how you've been spending your time PvPing in ESO. And so let's dive into that a little farther. So the first topic is going to be called the PvP traps. Okay, typically there's 3 traps of PvP in ESO, and these traps hurt the personal development of somebody that's trying to get better at PvP. Okay, the very first one is going to be called battlegrounds, and battleground objectives specifically. And so the battlegrounds have objectives in them: Chaos Ball, Capture the Relic, Domination, games like that, right? Deathmatch being the favored one for PvPers that enjoy, that are progressing their skills on an individual level. But the Chaos Ball, Domination, Capture the Relic specifically, there are people that will queue and they, in their mind, they're participating in PvP, right? But the reality of it is if they're so focused on the objective and trying to avoid PvP, because if I can avoid PvP but capture this Chaos Ball and keep the Chaos Ball as long as possible, my team wins. And so what happens is it's very easy to focus on those objectives and not get better at PvP itself. You still get killed in a 1v1 when you're running back to the ball or running back to the domination or trying to reconnect with your team. And those will be the individuals that just get extremely frustrated 3-4 years down the road when they're like, and what happens is those people think that it's a limitation that they have. I will never be better at PvP, or I suck at PvP. And it's not the case. It's actually the fact that they haven't reached out to any people or the right people for PvP training. That's what it is. And so they're putting themselves in a PvP environment, and they're expecting that that's going to progress them and get them better at PvP. And it will. It just takes a lot longer, and some people don't stick around for the process, right? Because they get frustrated with PvP and dying in those situations they shouldn't. So battlegrounds and the objectives, while very fun, that is a trap for a lot of people. And anyways, the next one is going to be PV Door, and that typically happens or only happens out in Cyrodiil. PV Door is your typical Cyrodiil experience. When you go out to Cyrodiil, you go and you go to a resource and you kill the guards at the resource, right, which is PvE, and occasionally somebody comes up that's PvP, or you get run over by a large group or whatever, but they're PvEing, capturing a resource, then they're going and say front dooring a keep, right, and they're PvEing against the guards there, and occasionally PvPing. Then they're killing the guards at the front door of the keep, on the inner wall, inside, and that's PvE, right, with a chance of PvP. And then they're killing the guards inside the keep, which is PvE. Okay, and so you can start to see that it's PvE with a dash of PvP, especially for the slower campaigns, you know. And so then what will happen, and I recently ran into an individual like this who is very good at killing NPCs on on resources, very good at killing the NPC at the front gate of a keep and taking the keep, very good at killing the NPCs at the outside keep, you know, to get in, killing the guards inside and flipping keeps, and they spend a lot of time in Cyrodiil. But when you fight them 1v1 or you fight them in a small group play or whatever, they don't have a good understanding of how to line up burst and how to put competent or intermediate to advanced PvPers away. And so they spend more time PvEing than they do PvPing. And when they get zerged or run down by a whole bunch of people, they might go into a kite game where they're just trying to stretch them out, or, you know, build ultimate, and then they're going to try and burst the people that are fast but squishy down, and that makes them feel good, you know. So PV Door is a sneaky PvP trap, because you will spend time being a happy little soldier jumping into a group and just being fodder or being an extra body, fulfilling objectives on the Cyrodiil map, but not necessarily getting better at PvP on an individual level. So your personal rotation, your ability to heal and you know, stay in a fight, and an extended fight, resource management and things of that nature have not been developed, you know. And so the whole strength in numbers, and so the strength in numbers in Cyrodiil specifically, maybe even IC too, we'll see this from time to time, especially as we get closer to White Strakes coming out here in about a month or so. But PV Door and strength in numbers leads to ball groups, and ball groups are a much more organized form of PvP. Probably rule number 1 is stay on crown. Rule number 2 is you're going to use these specific abilities that we tell you to use, and you're going to have a rotation that you spam these abilities, and you're going to stay with crown, spam these abilities, and those abilities aren't always the abilities that are best. Like if you were to catch one of those individuals, the way you break a ball group is to get them to spread out too far, right, or break their ranks. Or if you were to catch a regular ball grouper coming back to the group, right, from the camp, you usually could kill that individual pretty easily, right? And it's because they're not set up to PvP in a self-sustaining manner. The strength in numbers, right? And so strength in numbers, when we're talking about that, is in ESO, heal stacking and cross healing is a problem. That's why ball groups are so hard to kill, or small coordinated groups are so hard to kill. And heal stacking is, let's say I use radiating regen, and this hot that I do, just for the sake of math, this hot does 1,000 health coming in every second, right? Well, in a 1v1, somebody's going to be able to out damage 1,000 health coming in every second with my radiating regen, right? And so they'll make progress against me. But if Kyle's in my group and Kyle throws up a radiating regen also, now I have 2,000 health coming in every second, right? This is one ability. I hit the button once, Kyle hit the button once, and now I have 2,000 health. And some people in PvP, especially the ones that haven't developed their personal playstyle, they don't have a good burst rotation, they don't know how to maintain pressure, or they don't know how to sustain. So maybe they're really good at the front end of the fight, have great upfront burst, but then they shoot all their resources out the window, and then now all of a sudden they're having this channel heavy attacks to stay in the fight, and it's much less pressure coming from them, and it'll be in that moment where they get killed, right? Or those individuals get killed because you can bait them, and baiting is like I let my health get a little bit lower, not to where they can execute me or burst me, but I want them to stop focusing on reapplying their buffs, stop focusing on reapplying their heals because they think that they're going to be able to kill me, and those things drop off, their heals, and their buffs, and then I turn around and CC them and burst on them. So anyways, ball groups, we're talking about Kyle and I, and we're throwing out this radiating regen, and I now have 2,000 health coming in every second. If you add Lisa to the group and Lisa throws up that too, now it's 3,000 health coming in every second. You can see how this problematic. This is the push of one button from 3 people, right? Let alone 12. Okay, and that's them using radiating regen, and that's called stacking the heals. It's the same heal being used over and over, and there's just tons of them, right? Now, if you were to add a second ability, and all of a sudden it gets extremely problematic, right? You got 12 people running radiating regen, so there's what, 12k heals coming in every second, and now let's actually press our second button, which is another heal, and if everyone in the group, in a 12-man group, were to do that, now we've got 24k heals coming in every second, something really silly. Okay, now it doesn't quite work like that, but you get the idea. Okay, so heal stacking is a problem, and that's why there's strength in numbers. Cross healing is if Kyle had his own group of 4 and I had my own group of 4, and we're running side by side, and I saw that Kyle's group is getting really pressured in a PvP fight. My team can throw heals in his direction even though he's not in our group, and we can heal for him. And so cross healing is a problem as well. They don't even need to be in the group. And so what if Kyle has a 12-man group going and I have a 12-man group, and we're just running side by side? Now we've got 24 people and we're all cross healing and we're all heal stacking. There's the problem. All right, now the reason these are PvP traps, we've already talked about this, but the battlefield objectives, Cyrodiil objectives, which are taking the resources and taking the keeps and trying to get Emp, and then ball groups have their own objectives. Stick on crown, use these specific abilities in rotation, and but those objectives, each one of those objectives prevent people from becoming better at PvP on an individual level. Not having the proper burst, not having the proper HOTS or burst heals for themselves, not being able to recognize proper target selection in outnumbered fights, not being able to recognize what abilities are being used against them and how to counter all the different classes and the different play styles. And so all that said, this is not a knock on any of those play styles, okay? Because if you're limited on time and you just want to jump into battlegrounds with your guildies and do the objectives, that is fine. Then do that. But you can't then in turn 2 years from now come back and be mad or be upset that you are not better at PvP or you're not progressing as quickly as possible. It's because you chose to do that particular, that's how you chose to go at PvP in ESO, okay, if that makes sense. The same with Cyrodiil. If you choose to be a happy little soldier and to siege the front doors and take the resources and move the map and then push gatekeep people. Gatekeeping is your faction pushes and captures every camp, every keep, and every resource all the way to each of the rival factions' front gate, and then you just dominate or hold that map, yes, you are winning the campaign. Your faction's winning the campaign, but you're not winning the PvP battle, right? If you're one of the people that want to get better, that's not helping you out, okay? So, and then ball groups, it's not helping you out staying on crown and having a rotation. I would say that ball groups, out of those PvP traps, a ball group, you will probably have a better understanding of maintaining a rotation, buffs and heals, hots and stuff like that, and staying on crown. Those are really important lessons, So ball groupers have a really high ceiling as far as being able to take them out of the ball group and start teaching them how to be self-sustaining and have burst and have everything themselves, and be able to do that. And so that's the PvP traps, those three things, okay? Something about that we want to do is we want to get every individual self-sustaining, not because we want to create a bunch of 1vxers. That's what somebody will say, or someone might say, I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of those 1vxers. I don't know how they do it. It's insane. It's crazy or whatever. And it's actually not when you kind of reverse engineer the thing, okay? So let's start to do that here. Let's talk about personal development. The first thing when I'm working with a PvPer, we start talking about hard CCs and soft CCs in ESO. A hard CC is a stun. This can happen to a player every 7 seconds unless they have a movable pots going or some type of ability that allows you to not be stunned, okay? But typically every 7 seconds you could be stunned. A stun or a hard CC is anything that prevents you from doing movements or activities with your character. You can't cast any abilities and you can't move until you break free, okay? That's a hard CC. A soft CC is anything that slows, immobilizes, or roots you. A slow, immobilizer, or root doesn't prevent you from casting your heals or using abilities or targeting people, but you're stuck in place, okay? Those are on a 4-second cooldown. And so here is when you're an intermediate to advanced PvPer, you start to realize that you can kill people using hard and soft CCs, not just to line up your burst, but to make fights a resource fight, because not a lot of people are good at sustaining in fights. They will run out of stamina, break freeing and dodge rolling, or just dodge rolling to avoid piddly damage. They'll try and dodge roll too much, trying to avoid this damage that is insignificant, damage that's not going to put them on the ropes or kill them, right? And they're expending that stamina doing that. But you can control a fight just through establishing a hard CC and a soft CC and maintaining a little bit of pressure into people, and then just running their resources dry, and then they can't break free and they just have to eat the damage, and that's called stam checking them, okay? And so we start talking about hard CCs and soft CCs, and make sure that you at least have one of those on your bar somewhere, so that way you can line up your burst. And number 2 is proper rotation, which is talking about either having proper burst with a CC or proper heals. And typically your proper heals are at least bare minimum going to be 1 heal over time and 1 burst heal. So we'll get into this a little bit later, but let's say you're an Oaken Soul build. Bare minimum you want to have a hot, a heal over time, which a great heal over time right now is going to be Resolving Vigor, because it has a very good tooltip over 5 seconds, and this is in your assault line, and it's one of the morphs to the heal there, right? Resolving Vigor. But it also gives you access to Minor Resolve, which is additional resistances, okay? So you bare minimum want to have a heal over time and a burst heal. Then you're going to want to have a stun or an immobilization, right? And then you're going to want to have at least 2 damage sources. One of them's probably an execute to help you put people away, especially right now, stage 3 vampire, those people have 30% damage mitigations when they fall under, a certain percentage of health, and they're very hard to put away. Now that's going to change in about a month, but it's still going to be 10% damage mitigation, and then they can stack other resistances, or other mitigation sources, so they can have major and minor protection, plus whatever access. Maybe they're running buffer of the swift, which with an extra 10, or they're a werewolf that has 10% passive mitigation. There's a lot of other ways, and so some people can be extremely tanky, and they're not even really considered a quote-unquote tank. They just have a lot of mitigations, and they're also offsetting the amount of damage that comes in with the amount of hots and heals that they have on themselves. And so, anyways, that's what we'll talk about is proper rotation. And so when we're talking with a person, and an important part of this whole process is to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, which class, what play style best speaks to you. We have a gentleman that has been PvPing for a while, and he just said this a couple days ago. Redbird's his name, awesome guy. Redbird said, I really, really started having fun PvPing once I started PvPing with you guys, and I found that he has a love for bow builds. He really enjoys bow build, and so he's been running around on my Hawkeye, and I saw a battleground where he was like 28-1 or something like that. Like, he's just having a blast with it. It's very important on an individual level. Don't let people tell you which race to play, which class to play, or what play style. You need to figure that out for yourself, something that really speaks to you. And then once you figure that out, maybe you need help finding that. Once you figure that out, then fine tune it, hone in on it, and get good with it. Spend time with it. Bare minimum, spend like 4 to 6 months playing that play style, playing that character. If you bounce around too much and you're just flavor of the week type person, whatever I'm going to play this week, but you haven't perfected your individual skills, you're going to have a rough time. You will be a prime example of one of those people that find yourself 4 years down the road and not ever found the class that you like, or the play style that you like, or you got caught in those PvP traps that we were talking about, right? You're a prime candidate for that. So, let's talk about Oakensoul versus 2-bar. In a 2-bar setup, you definitely can manage more heals, and you can definitely manage more damage, okay? However, some people have physical limitations, or they're just at a part, or they're at this part in their PvP journey that managing all the buffs and managing 2 bars and all the abilities is a little much. Okay, I run Oakensoul on a lot of my builds, and I also have 2-bar. We can do both of them. But if you're one of those people that when you start PvPing or someone starts fighting you, your hands get a little shaky and the nerves are there still while you're PvPing, that's fine. A lot of people experience that in PvP. You actually, the more you PvP, the more you do some of these things that we're going to be talking about, the less that happens. And then all of a sudden you just start reacting. And that's why, like, boot camps for the military, the Marines, or anybody, they're drilling. Or if you do combat sports, drillers make killers. So the more you drill, the less nervous you will get, the better understanding you'll have of where and when to CC, and where and when to burst, and when you're truly in trouble versus I'm not really in trouble right now. Maybe I took some really big hits there, but I can recover from this. And you start learning these intricacies of PvP, right? Oakensoul You don't have to maintain your major resolve. You don't have to maintain your major brutality, major sorcery. So that's less time spent with upkeep on abilities. So Oaken Soul's a lot easier for new PvPers in that regard. Oaken Soul is harder for new PvPers in regard to killing people because you if I have a heal over time on my bar for an Oaken Soul build, which you should, and if I have a burst heal, which you should, to be self-sustaining, self-reliant, right? Unless you're running around in a ball group or you're expecting Sarah and Kyle and Lisa to heal you and you're not running any heals at all, don't recommend it. You'll get killed very easily if you're away from Lisa, Kyle, and Sarah, and then you'll complain 4 years from now that you're getting killed. But you should have a heal over time. You should have a burst heal. You should have some form of CC or crowd control, a hard CC or a soft CC. And then that leaves you only 2 slots for damage abilities. And maybe your CC is a damage ability as well, which is great. So now you have 3 damage sources, but you know that most CCs don't have a really high tooltip attached to them as far as damage output, unless you're a DK, your Fossilize hits hard or your Burning Talons hits hard. But most of the time it's just the stun with maybe a debuff or something to that effect, or a dot damage over time effect attached to it. So you only have 2 slots left, right, on an Oaken Soul build, and one of those is probably an execute, which means that you're not using it until they hit execute phase, unless you're a Templar and you're just spamming your execute beam at 50% health and under, because of the scaling on it right now. It's very busted, but then that leaves you 1 primary spammable, okay? And so Oaken Soul builds, that's what you're looking at. A spammable, an execute if you can, or another spammable bare minimum, a CC, a hot, and a burst heal. And so you have to become very proficient at killing people with only basically 3 offensive abilities, counting CCs, and a hot and a burst heal. Okay? And so anyways, I'm not against Oaken Soul. I have a bunch of Oaken Soul builds and a bunch of play styles with that, and it's fun. Oaken Soul's fun because of the no reapplying buffs and just go offensive. And another thing too, I guess, in regards to Oaken Soul is it's very easy because you don't have buff maintenance. You don't have to reapply your major resolve, major brutality, major sorcery. You can just go all offensive, just go, go, go. If you're not very good at resource management, you can run yourself out of resources and basically kill yourself. I don't have enough stamina to break free because I was just go, and now I'm dead. Okay, and so, which is something we'll talk about in part of the training part of it. But I'm not against Oaken Soul versus 2-bar. What your bar looks like in a 2-bar build is going to be, you're going to have your offensive buff, major brutality, major sorcery, unless you have armor sets that are offsetting that. You're going to have, and most of the time you have to cast that to activate it. Arcanist has like their major brutality, major sorcery literally is just a passive buff. You put it on their bar, which is part of the balancing issue that a lot of people complain about. Is if we can do that for Arcanist, why can we not do that for other classes? Side note, but you don't even need to activate that or expend the resources to activate that buff. They're going to have their major resolve, which is going to be their armor buff, and then it's probably 1 or 2 utility items. So let's say Crystal Slab from a Warden. You're tired of getting Nightblade spec bowed for 20 plus K, right? As a Warden, you should probably put Crystal Slab on your bar so those things are stopped. Those massive damage bursts are stopped through that. It's a huge shield and really, really strong against ranged attacks against you. But then you're going to have a bunch of variations of heals over times and burst heals, right? You might have 1 or 2 burst heal options. One may be a mag pull utilizing magicka, and the other one may be a stamina pull utilizing stamina. The same with your hots. You might have two separate hots as well. So your back bar on, say, a warden, you might have resolving vigor. You might have a magicka heal over time that might even apply a shield if you're using scribing. Then you're going to have leeching vines or some form of hot, and then you're going to have some burst heals and probably your armor buff. Maybe even put your Betty, your access to major brutality, major sorcery on your back bar. So both your buffs, two hots or two burst heals and one hot, whatever variation you want to run, right? So you have a lot of healing capabilities on your back bar. Okay, then on your front bar, because you have everything you need on your back bar as far as buffs and hots and heals, you can just go damage, right? Or CCs, right? Two forms of CCs. You can even run both a hard CC and a soft CC, and then 3 damage sources. And that's the value of a 2-bar build, if you can manage a 2-bar build once you get there. And so a lot more utility, a lot more flexibility, a lot more self-heals. Okay, so this all comes back to where should you be PvPing, right? Battlegrounds are a great place to PvP. I don't think, and what I advise people is, don't get so locked into the objectives. Otherwise, you'll be one of those people that will find yourself 3-4 years from now, and you're frustrated that you're losing 1v1s, and you don't feel that you should, right? That's not your personal limitation. That's just how you've been spending your time PvPing isn't progressing you the way it should. Okay. Battlegrounds are fine. I purposely, the way I use battlegrounds are, those are my dojo. That's my gym. I'm going to, when I'm build testing, I go into a battleground because fights are very easy to come by. It's not like Cyrodiil, which is a mount simulator, and yeah, I can see where combat is on the map, but I don't have to ride out to it continuously. In battlegrounds, I'm basically put in a queue and dropped right in, and I know that where people are going to be. If they're playing the objectives, domination, all I need to do is run to the flags, and there's going to be fights there for me. If they're doing Chaos Ball, I just need to run to the Chaos Ball. There's going to be people there to fight. If it's capture the relic, all I need to do is run to the relics, and there's going to be fights. So I use battlegrounds in that regard to get better test builds. I want to see how this build sustains. I want to see how the damage lines up on it. I want to see if I can make fights resource fights on it. Some of my builds, like Ghost of Sparta Kratos, if you've ever seen those videos, I don't have a CC on him. It's just damage and heals, and I'm not lining up my burst behind a stun and trying to make it a resource fight. I'm just trying to burst their face off, okay? And it's working for him. But typically, that play style of just bursting people's face off and not having any access to CCs is not the play. But anyways, I'll use battlegrounds to test builds and see how they sustain, how they burst lines up, how the heals line up, and I will run off purposely away from my team to test myself. 1v1 that hopefully rolls into another 1v1 or outnumbered. I'm just going to go, if you were watching the live stream that I just did on Starkiller and I was build testing, I would go off and just 1v4. And it's not like I'm trying to say, look at me, I'm a 1vxer, and I'm legit stress testing the build or the play style. And when we talk about play style, we're talking about the abilities that you put on your bar. If you put too many abilities on your bar that lean towards one resource pool like magicka or stamina, you could get yourself killed because you're not set up properly with the proper abilities to pull from fields, and I stam check myself, and that's what got me killed, or I have no mag left and I can't use my burst heal and I'm here stuck in a crazy fight. That's what got me killed. And so figuring out that the sweet science, or that balance, that sweet balance of abilities to sustain yourself in outnumbered fights is very important. It's extremely important. So if you could do that, if you can sustain in a 1v1 and win in a 1v1 and then roll right into another 1v1 and sustain through that and be ready, like it didn't matter. If there was a line of 10 people, you could just knock them down one at a time, then you've got that build at a sweet spot as far as sustain goes, and probably damage as well if you're putting people away like that. And then outnumbered, it's a lot more of a resource pull and starts leaning into some other nuances of PvP, like line of sight, when to dodge roll, when to block, and things like that. Some other videos that I've done. Okay. So I'll use Battlegrounds to test builds, and we'll use Battlegrounds to kind of subject ourselves to outnumbered fights, and it's outnumbered fights on demand, so it works out really well. I'll see this a lot when we're talking about Battlegrounds. I'll see that people will complain, you're not, what are you doing over there? You're not even playing the objective. That person right there is so hyper focused on playing the objective and winning the objective, probably because it's their daily, or they understand that they're in a PvP zone or PvP environment, but they don't understand what it takes to get better at PvP down the road. Right, 2-3 years from now, that person might still struggle in 1v1s. Whereas if you use Battlegrounds as your training ground to do what we're talking here, you'll be way better off than they will. Then you can go in there, and if you just choose to play the objective, that's fine, because you've gone through the paces, you've progressed on an individual level, and you're probably one of those people that are coming out of the Battlegrounds with a better kill to death ratio, than others. And so I think those individuals too, on a side note, they put way too much value in the scoring system of the individual objective based battleground as opposed to their kill to death ratio. Because if you're throwing yourself into the fights and coming out of it, say 20-3 or 15-5, that is a great kill to death ratio, knowing that you're literally throwing yourself into the fights. That's great. Okay? But if you're coming out of Battlegrounds just playing the objectives and you're coming out 1-8, but you're leading in points, well, congratulations, you won the objective, but you lost at PvP. Right? You're the prime candidate for the 2 to 3 years down the road being frustrated with where you're at, or even right now you're frustrated and it hasn't even been 2 or 3 years, right? So view Battlegrounds in regards to just your dojo or your gym to personally test builds, play styles, rotations, and don't get hyper focused on the objectives. Get hyper focused on getting better at PvP. Cyrodiil, don't be a happy little soldier. X up in zone chat, somebody picks you up, you're not in comms with them, and you're just running around setting up siege and killing NPCs outside keeps and gates and things like that, and when PvP happens, you get killed, and hopefully there's a camp, and if there's not, then you're doing the mount simulator, and you're riding back to the fight to get killed again. 2 or 3 years down the road, that gets really stale and very frustrating for a lot of the people that I train. And they realize that they got stuck in that loop, that never-ending story. And so when you're going into Cyrodiil, you should focus on making sure that every 1v1 that you run into, you win that 1v1. Or every outnumbered, hopefully you start winning those using line of sight and things like that. You don't have to be a happy little soldier. And that's why you'll see people just flipping resources, and then they're just waiting there, and people will call them tower humpers and things like that. Well, the problem is, yes, they're tower humping, but it's because there's a lot of damage in the game, especially via proc sets, and there's way more damage in the game than there used to be, right? We're moving away from skill-based PvP when the amount of free damage and free healing from proc sets is off the charts. So they have to line of sight or tower hump, as people say, just to survive and turn around and burst on people and put them away. Tower humping became way more of a necessity to 1vx or fight outnumbered with the addition of proc sets. It's just a fact, and there's no way around it really. Okay, so focus on your individual progression when you're going out in Cyrodiil, and don't be afraid to look for fights. And then ball groups, you know, I said this earlier, but the ball groupers, they can drop out of a ball group. We change their bars, their rotation on their bar, and they have a good understanding of how to stay on crown, how to, more importantly, they know how to manage a rotation. So they're going to do very good keeping up their hots and buffs and their heals. They're just not going to do a good job, and they'll also understand line of sight as well. They're not going to understand how to put burst into people, single target burst into people, and how to fight people on a 1v1 or outnumbered 1vx scenario, because they're always in a group. They'll also struggle when it is only their heals and they don't have all the other heals coming in. What real pressure feels like in a 1v1 and stuff like that. When they're in trouble, they'll need to establish like this internal alarm of when they're in trouble and when they're not in trouble. And so, but anyways, the other way that I would spend on a personal level would be dueling. And I don't recommend for the new PvPers, I don't recommend going outside one of the major cities and dueling those guys. Most of the guys out there, guys and gals out there, are running the most meta cracked stuff, the most broken stuff, right? These duelists are, sometimes they're out there testing different builds and different whatever, but there's a lot of individuals out there that are very ego driven. Okay, and that's all they're doing. They're taking the most meta, most broken, most cracked stuff, and they're going out there, and it's an ego trip for them to be able to duel and win against all these people. And there are some people that are very honest with that group of people. They're very honest with themselves, and they're like, yeah, bro, I'm running cheese. Cheese being multiple proc sets. I have tons of free damage and tons of free healing, you know, because it's in the game and I'm going to use it. I'm running meta. That's fine. I'm not knocking that. And most of those people have got to the part where they understand hard CCs, soft CCs, and they understand all the intricacies of PvP. Those guys are there, guys and gals are there, and you know, they're intermediate to advanced PvPers, and they're trying to see exactly where they stand with things. I don't recommend that you go there and put yourself through that unless you're the type of person that throws yourself at the lion over and over and over again, knowing that eventually you'll beat the lion. Most people don't like learning that way. It becomes disheartening, and they quit before they get to where they want to be. So what I recommend is we stage mock duels. And a mock duel, when I have a guild bring me in to train their guild in PvP, we'll set up mock duels. And for a lot of people, as soon as we say duels, everybody's hand gets shaky and they start getting nervous, and they're like, oh, I'm going to be fighting people, and am I going to be up to snuff, and is anybody going to make fun of me because I can't PvP, and you know, or is this person going to be ego and they're like the best PvPer in this guild, and you know, now all of a sudden they think they're hot stuff. And like, there is a lot of that going on, and that's the detractor from doing this. But there's so much more positive or upside by doing this as a guild. But mock duels are set up in a fashion where it's very similar to sparring in a gym. At least sparring in today's day and age. I'm a trainer outside of ESO as well, but to sparring in today's day and age, we might be going 20 or 30%, and it's considered timing sparring. Neither one of us are trying to knock each other out. We just want to pressure each other a little bit. Maybe every once in a while we'll bump it up to 50%, or we'll bump up our speed and try and press them or try and pressure them just to see how they react and how they recover from it, how they sustain through it. And so mock duels, you would organize with guilds or organize with a group of friends, and you say, look, your job is not to kill the person, but try and get them as low as you can without killing them, and give them an opportunity to turn the fight and fight back. Turning the fight is one of the most underrated skills in ESO PvP. Turning the fight. And turning the fight is, I got really low, bursted really low, how do I recover from it, and then how do I go back to offensive in a safe manner. And we're not talking about I get bursted and then I turn around and CC them and then I start trying to kill them back, right? You know, nobody kills me without me killing you back, silliness. And then you're standing there with like 20% health trying to kill somebody. You're going to get killed doing that. What we're talking about is you get your hots going, you maintain your buffs, you get a burst heal going, you CC the person, line up your burst, and now you put them on the ropes. That's turning a fight. And anyone that has had the PvP journey and have reached intermediate to advanced, they know this to be true, that turning a fight is extremely valuable. Otherwise, you're just a run VXer, and we run into those guys all the time. You know, they're a one-trick pony as far as their burst output goes, and they spend more time running and kiting and hoping that they can catch a new PvPer that doesn't understand the nuances of PvP, and so that way they get their ego fix, right? We're going to kill this person that has not trained in PvP, and now I feel awesome about myself. There's a lot of those guys, okay? They've developed the run VX mentality, not the 1VX mentality. So anyways, we've talked about the PvP traps. We've talked about personal development. Oaken Soul versus 2-bar, hard CCs, soft CCs. We've talked about proper rotation, proper heals, and where you should PvP. It's okay to go to Cyrodiil, look for fights, and try and progress there. Imperial City, let's talk about that real quick. Imperial City is layers. There's layers to Imperial City. Like if you go to the sewers, you can farm Telvar for the most time, and every once in a while you'll run into a group, or there'll be a player hunter that comes through trying to collect their Telvar from you, right? It's their Telvar, not yours. You're just collecting it for them, just so you know. But the sewers are that. I've leveled almost all my characters in Battlegrounds or Imperial City sewers. So there's been a lot of people, this happens to me a lot, I'll be on a lobby and somebody will come through and kill me and then start teabagging me, and it's like, really, bro? I'm on a level 20, you know, whatever. But I'm not bitter, you're bitter. Sometimes, more times than not, I kill them on the level 20 though, so, and that's super funny. But anyways, the sewers are more PvE with a dash of PvP. So the sewers are a great place for you. Like if you want to hang out with your friends and have the potential of PvP, the sewers are a great place to go. Side note, I'll make anywhere from 1 to like 2 million gold a week just playing in the sewers. And that's taking the Telvar, purchasing the Hakejo, and then putting the Hakejo up for sale. And so that's pretty nice. And I have another video that's probably like 4 years old talking about Imperial City, and I can redo that if anybody's interested. But Imperial City Sewers is PvE with a dash of PvP, so it's great for newer PvPers or people that are playing in a group, or they just want to, you know, have a very chill PvP night. Right, it's more PvE with a dash of PvP. The districts, however, is some of the best small-scale PvPers in all of ESO. And so if you want very stiff fights, there are times and windows that when you go to the Imperial City districts, you're going to have some of the toughest fights you've ever fought. Tougher than Battlegrounds, tougher than Cyrodiil even. And I don't know why that is. It's just the way it is on PCNA and PCEU. Okay, a lot of the best small scalers like going to the districts, probably because it's not so much a mount simulator and it forces the fights, but it's not necessarily a battleground. Or they go there up in the districts while they're in queue for battleground. So they're in their 4-man group, they're pre-made, and they'll just run the districts, killing bosses, killing players until their queue pops, right? So I don't recommend going up to the districts unless you're ready for some potentially very stiff fights. It's funny that most of the questing from the Imperial City sewers, or the Imperial City, the questing is up in the districts, which kind of, brings the sheep to those elite level PvPers. It brings the people that just are trying to get their dailies done and not interested so much in PvPing, and forcing them to have to swim in the water with the sharks. And so it is what it is, though. Okay, but that's the layers to it, to Imperial City, and that can be a lot of fun. Let's talk about some training. Okay, these are different things that we run into. And we talked about mock dueling, and if you're going to be doing the mock dueling, that's great for personal development. Like, I can't speak enough about how good that is with the proper dueling. I can tell you that if you have a training partner that is not a good training partner, they'll just smoke you over and over again. They're just going to destroy you, and it's more about them. It's more an ego trip from them and how awesome they are, right? Or they think iron sharpens iron. Iron does sharpen iron, but if their first burst rotation or second burst rotation's killing you, you're not learning a whole lot. And so you're not learning how to turn a fight. You're not learning how to manage your resources. You're not learning how to line up your burst. And so that's not a good dueling partner. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for somebody that will slowly progress the effort and damage up as your skill set progresses, to where now all of a sudden you guys are both able to go full bore at each other and it be almost a standstill. Talking about standstill too, a lot of people, we are in a tank meta. I don't think that we're ever going to be out of a tank meta in ESO, and that's because of proc sets. There's so much free damage and free healing in proc sets that you can maintain damage through the proc sets, and therefore you can build tanky. Okay, and that's just the way the game is designed. There's so much free damage, free healing via various proc sets in the game. So you just build tanky so you could survive, and between your class and weapon skills and the damage from the proc set, you'll pressure people. And that's why we're in a tank meta. Also, we're in a tank meta because shields and shield stacking is such a thing now, right? Scribing, you can set up multiple skills to grant you a shield. There's multiple armor sets in the game that can grant you a shield. There's multiple class abilities that can grant you a shield. So every class has access to shield stacking now. Okay. And then the other thing that leads to a tank meta is cross healing and heal stacking, and those two things. And we've said this for 4 years now. I don't know that they ever change heal stacking, and what that looks like is any heal that is called, like radiating regen. When we use the example from earlier, when I put radiating regen on myself and it's ticking every second for 1,000, if Kyle casts radiating regen, it renews my radiating regen but doesn't stack with mine. It cancels mine out and it does his. And it either does his because it's a stronger hot, like maybe his is healing for 1,200, or it just cancels mine out because of the timer. He refreshed the duration of that ability going on me, but I can only have that one on me, as opposed to Kyle, Lisa, Sarah, all the people stacking the same named heal on me. That leads to tankiness, right? That's a whole lot of extra, like, burst damage I need to if every second 12k heals are coming in, I need to do 30k damage within the next second to kill this person. Otherwise, they're going to get another 12k heals. Okay? I don't think that any of this is going to change. This is what ESO PvP is going to be. I don't see them getting rid of proc sets. Don't see them getting rid of heal stacking or cross healing. Don't see them getting rid of shields. As a matter of fact, it's, scribing. It's a huge part of scribing. So it is going to be what it is right now forever. Okay. Full duels. Getting to a part where you can go full out on people, that is preferred. Another training thing that we do is using target dummies. And so PvE, people need to recognize that in PvE, let's say you have somebody that parses 130k. Now I see people posting videos of 130k DPS, which is insane, but they're doing 130k DPS. They're perfecting that ability. And so if we went and we talked to a raid leader and we said, what's the average DPS that you see? They might say 50, 60, 80k. We'll say 50 to 80k. So those people that are doing 130k are, in some cases, twice the DPS of the norm, of the average. Okay, that's a huge disparity between your average PvEer DPS and the top tier. That's a huge disparity. They're almost double. That disparity that we're talking about exists in PvP as well. You have people that don't know anything about anything and are starting to learn, right, PvP, and they're fodder. They're just getting killed over and over again, and without the proper training, that'll go on for a long time. Then the intermediate people might have a basic understanding of how to heal and when they're in danger and stuff like that. But then there's this top tier people, and top tier people are running the most meta everything, and or they're in a group that everyone's running the most meta everything, and they're feeding into each other with different armor sets, and so they're pushing 9k, 10k weapon and spell damage, and they understand their burst rotation just perfectly. They're deleting people in a millisecond, and that disparity exists between the intermediate and the absolute top tier in the PvP side of it. Now, a lot of PvEers don't realize that, but when we connect those wires, right, like we let them know that that disparity exists on both sides of it. So however much time you've spent perfecting your parse, your PvE rotation, if you want to get good at PvP, that's a whole other animal, and you need to dedicate that a much amount of time to that as well. So in the combat sports world, we talk about southpaw versus conventional, and a lot of people are kind of enamored with switching back and forth between southpaw and conventional. When do I get to learn southpaw? When do I get to learn conventional? Whatever. And I have to break it down to this. I'm like, look, if you are only training 10 hours a week, some people are like 10 hours a week. We're talking about people that are competing in Bellator and the UFC and stuff. But if you're training only 10 hours a week, if we dedicate 100% of that time to conventional stance striking, you're going to progress. If we have to split the time, and half the time you're learning traditional, conventional striking, and half the time you're learning southpaw, when you go up against somebody that's spending all their time in one and really honing in and perfecting it, you're going to be half as good at them, right? It's just math. It's basic math, and so spending too much time bouncing around from different things. It's like in ESO spending too much time bouncing around to different classes, which is fine to try and figure out what you want to be when you grow up, but when you're trying to hyper focus and get good, it's not good. Okay, so anyways, training dummies, you can parse on training dummies for PvP purposes, and that's basically getting your burst rotation. Let's take the most basic example. If you're using a bow on any PvP type thing, I would say 90% of people don't realize that you can hold heavy attack while your snipe is going. So as soon as you activate snipe, hold heavy attack, and if you time it and let go of your heavy attack as your snipe releases, because it's automatically going to go on its own, your snipe or lethal arrow or focused aim, whichever one you're running, but your snipe, your heavy attack, and your weapon enchant will all hit at the same time. It increases your burst potential exponentially. You hit one button after that, which for me might be Magnum Shot or whatever. Or let's take my Witcher build, which is a Necro Bow build. I'll summon my Blast Bones, which is on a 2-second delay. Blast Bones is coming up out of the ground, then he's going to stand there, take a smoke break, and then finally decide to go to attack who I want him to attack, but that's a delayed burst, right? I'll summon my Blast Bones, channel the lethal or focused aim, holding the heavy attack, and then just as my heavy attack, my lethal arrow and my weapon enchant and the Blast Bones all hit people all at once. That's a lot of damage. That's a lot of damage. That's a lot of burst. And people don't realize that. Okay? It's very simple things like that that as soon as we explain to them about like things like animation canceling and what abilities line up better with one another, or you know, the real kicker to that burst combination that we were just talking about is that I summon the Blast Bones, which has a great tooltip and applies Major Defile. I start hitting my snipe, which goes into its cast animation. I'm holding my heavy attack. Everything gets released all at once. My Blast Bones hits them, applying Major Defile, major burst damage. My snipe hits them for major damage. My heavy attack hits them for major damage. And the enchant on my weapon hits them for major damage. And then I hit Magnum Shot as a really quick follow-up, and my Magnum Shot with the bow stuns them, knocks them back 6 meters, 8 meters, whatever, and stuns them. And then I turn around and do that rotation again. By the time they break free, if they're standing there not holding block and not dodge rolling, they're about to eat the second burst. That's if they survive the first one, right? If we throw any number of, like if I was wearing Tarnished, Tarnish is going to hit them, you know, for another 8k, you know, 5 to 8k right there. If I'm wearing some type of proc set, there's a whole bunch of free damage, additional damage coming in. You know, if I'm a Nightblade, like I'm on my Hawkeye, it would be right after the Magnum Shot, I hit my Merciless. And my Merciless Spec Bow hits them for 20k. They're dead. Okay? So anyways, a training dummy is a great way to practice that. You don't necessarily have a dueling partner, but you could just jump on the training dummy and perfect that. Simple things like that. Another thing, if you're sword and board, you can actually do a light attack, you can gap close with shielded assault while holding attack. And at the end of your shielded assault stun, you'll also, and release the attack, you'll heavy attack and then just bash. And so it's shield assault, heavy attack, bash, boom, boom, boom. And simple rotations like that, making it just part of your thing. Another thing too about knowing how to channel those heavy attacks, you sustain a lot longer in that scenario, because heavy attacks or medium to heavy attacks return resources, stamina, mag, whatever. They return resources. If I'm expending resource stamina to initiate my snipe, but my heavy attack returns it, it's almost an even trade or very close. I can fight longer. I can fight way longer than somebody that just spams lethal arrow, lethal arrow, lethal arrow, lethal arrow, lethal arrow, and now I'm out of stamina and I die. Okay, so it's simple things like that that you can perfect on training dummies, and a lot of people don't take that into account. Another thing that you can do is what we do is we do a battleground backseat driver. And so what we'll do is somebody will come into our Discord and we'll have them do a screen share, and then I just watch them run a battleground. And most of the times, we talk about this in other videos, people are dying in battlegrounds because of the 3 big things that get you killed. You're out of position, you're out of resources, or you're outnumbered. Those things are almost always the reason that you die, unless you're me and you dodge roll off the map, whatever. Don't worry about that. Or you're getting uh, a mystery 30k fall damage in a battleground. I'm sure some of you have experienced that. Or the portal's not working in one of the battlegrounds and you go to teleport down to the battleground and you just run right off. That stuff happens. Anyways, battlegrounds, backseat driving, out of position, out of resources, or outnumbered. And a good example that we talk about is if like your team comes up and say red team is right outside their base. Let's say it's capture the relic and your whole team runs over to capture red's relic. Let's say you wipe red team, you kill them all, and just as you're fighting them, purple team comes up. So then you just turn to the left and you start fighting purple team, not taking into account where red's respawn is. Red is respawning right there, and red just respawns, jumps down right on your head, and you're pinched or flanked. You're caught in between two teams, and your team dies, and that's because you're out of position, right? Either you're out of position, or it ended up ultimately leading to you being outnumbered or out of resources, right? All three of them happened to you because you didn't move or rotate properly. Where to be and where not to be is a huge part of a better kill to death ratio in battlegrounds. And when we're talking about increasing your time on target in battlegrounds, let's take I run into this a lot with new PvPers who maybe they go 3 and 6 or they go 6 and 6, or I had my best battleground and I went 10 and 10, and it's like, hey, that's great, you got those 10 kills. Now let's start eliminating your 10 deaths, okay, by eliminating you either being out of resources, outnumbered, or out of position. Once we start tackling each one of those individually, you'll notice that you'll start experiencing less deaths per battleground, and you'll also notice on the flip side you will start getting more kills, and it's because you're out on the battlefield fighting from a better position. I have the high ground, whatever. But you're out there fighting more, and when you're out there fighting more, you're increasing the likelihood that you can secure more kills. Getting killed less, killing people more. Great. Okay? And so those three things, battlegrounds are great. That's why the backseat driving, we start talking about using the battlegrounds as a dojo or a training gym, and let's eliminate those three things and watch what happens. As you're going through that journey, eliminating those three things, like those three things, worrying about those three things, fighting outnumbered, fighting out of resources, and fighting out of position, those are like things that are on a side note. While you're doing that, you also have to maintain your buffs, maintain your CCs, and line up your burst and do the things. Recognize when a DK hits corrosive. Recognize that the sorcerer hit his overload and he's getting ready to burst on you. Like, you have to have situational and spatial awareness for these things. And so it takes time. It takes time to develop this, and if you are not hyper-focused on developing these tools, you'll be the person that's in the battleground that's playing the objective and doesn't get better. You'll be the PV Durer and Cyrodiil that doesn't get better. You'll be the ball grouper that doesn't get better at those particular skills. So, all right. Another thing that we'll do as far as training goes is we do IC war games. And so when you have a guild, we've done this with multiple guilds, and some of the guys that I run with are some of the best PvP trainers. They're very thoughtful. They understand different classes, and they understand different rotations. They understand theory crafting and everything. But what we'll do is we'll organize war games in the Imperial City sewers, and so we'll put a group of 6 on DC and 6 on EP, and we will do mock war games, we'll say, hey, we're all going to meet at Molag and we're going to fight it out down there. And usually, if it's 6v6, we'll have one person sit off to the side for each so they can res the individuals. And it allows for a 5v5, or 6v6 or whatever group size. And it allows you to have the combat, res everyone, and then everyone's in their own respective. We have different Discord channels, and so AD team is going to be in their own Discord channel, and they're going to be like, hey, that didn't work out. We're going to target the healer this time, or we're going to target this person, or we're going to split push, whatever we're doing. And so those are things we'll talk about here in a second. And so war games is a lot of fun. You can also mix it up and say, hey, this district, we like our squad's pretty solid. This district is where we're at. Let's just fight up in this district over and over again, and it'll be a lot of fun. And then you can even mix and match the teams. For me, I'm not so much. I understand that people are like, we're EP for life, or we're DC for life, or we're AD for life, or whatever, but there are toxic jerks in every faction. That's just the fact of the matter. And there's toxic jerks in your faction, whatever faction you are, I guarantee it. So don't become so hyper-focused on what faction you are at the expense of your personal development. Okay, and what I mean by that is and this happened just a couple days. Actually, this happened just yesterday. DC has in Cyrodiil, they have everyone gated. The entire map is blue. Okay, and I have a group of people that want to train, do some open world training, and we're not going to get that if we log into DC and we're running alongside these 50 people that just cleared the entire map, and now there's literally nothing to do out here in Cyrodiil. We're not going to get those fights. But if we switch to EP or AD, and we're not trying to flip the maps, we're not being spies or anything like that, we're just looking for fights. And if there's 50 DC on or more, we're going to have some crazy outnumbered fights. So we'll really get to test our builds, test our playstyle, test our strategy, our tactics. We'll really be pressured and stressed test, and that's what we want. So we'll go where the fights are. And so we log into EP and we go out there to fight the horde, fight all those people. And so some people have a major problem with that, but it's all about perspective and the objective. Our objective is not to flip the map. Our objective is to get better at PvP and to clean up our group play, and we want the fights. And so we'll go out and throw ourselves at it. And so some people have such a small mind that they don't understand that concept at all. They think, I flip the map, I get EMP, therefore I'm winning. And those individuals are very quick to recruit somebody that X's up in zone chat because I need another minion to man the siege or jump on the ram or kill the NPCs while I, run VX. So, and all those minions, all those people end up 3-4 years down the road not, being as far along as they should in PvP on an individual level. Okay. Anyways, let's go back to that. The IC War Games. IC War Games are awesome, and it's a lot of fun to organize that. Also, you could do Battleground Nights with your guilds, and we'll do that. And you can have a bunch of individuals solo queuing, and then it adds for different combinations and rotations of people ending up on each other's teams, and that's a lot of fun when you have a solo queue BG night. You can also do group queue BG night, and group queue is a lot of fun as well. And I think the other thing too is target selection as far as training goes. And when we're talking about target selection, we're specifically talking about, let's say I have a group of 5 and we run into a group of 5. I'm usually a frontliner I'm one of the first people into the fight. My job as a frontliner is to draw all the ultimates and survive through it and push past their front line, because their front line is probably their beefy boys and beefy girls, like the very tanky people. I need to push past that group and get into their second line, like their healers and their squishies. Okay, the right off the bat, by just doing that, sometimes you can break the ranks of an enemy team because they're not organized and they don't know how to move. Once that happens, they don't know how to counter that. Sometimes an unorganized group, if I push into the group past their front line and get into the middle of the group and I start attacking their squishies, their healers, or whoever, their front line actually turns to fight me, exposing their back or their flank to the rest of my team. We'll kill a group just through that simple thing. Me pushing past the front line and getting into the... Okay, so that's a thing. Another way that we kill people is unorganized groups. Once you get into their group or into their ranks, they spread to the winds. The healer runs over this way, this guy runs over that way. The frontliners might even be keep pushing forward and pushing into our second line or trying to kill our healers. And if our healers can fight outnumbered, they for sure can handle a 1v1. As a healer, if you can't handle a 1v1, then how are you going to handle group play, right? Because you're going to be targeted as the healer. Something to consider. But breaking their ranks is a huge problem because the healer has to heal everybody, and if the healer's having to line of sight and kite, and these other people are running off this way and doing that, you're going to wipe that whole group. And so that's one of the best aha moments for guilds that we're training, when they start breaking the ranks or being able to win those field fights or open field fights or win those group v group fights, and they break the ranks. The first time they witness that, it's super exciting for them, and I love that moment. But the problem that it presents is the healer can't throw heals also to their frontliners when the healer's trying to stay alive themselves, right? They're now in self-preservation mode, and their frontliners ended up getting killed pushing in too far into our group, right? Or their frontliners get killed because they turn to attack our frontliners or me, and they get flanked or hit from behind, or the first engagement, like these are all intermediate PvPers, the first engagement lasts for a little bit, but then it becomes a resource fight, and we win the resource fight because they're having to expend more resources. The healer is under duress, having to kite, taking damage, and also trying to heal his own frontliners that are getting hit from all sides. And so there's things like that we try to create through our war games and through Battlegrounds group queues and stuff like that, or open world and Cyrodiil. And so that's a lot of fun. Target selection is just super important. Pushing into a group and how to relieve those ranks. So when I push into a group, I don't stay there indefinitely. I stay there until my resources are starting to get low, and then we do a thing called peeling, and I fall back to my group where the heals are strongest, cross heals and heal stacking is the strongest, and give my resources a chance to catch back up, while our next tankiest person or other people jump in and maintain the pressure. And so through that, we're maintaining it as a resource fight and putting damage into them, and also throwing another new threat at them. And sometimes it's that switching of the guards. I fall back and the next people jump in, and they have their ults ready to go, and they jump in and drop their ults, and it puts so much pressure into the group that was already barely making it. And so we'll see that switching of guards Another thing too, which I do a lot of, is I take pokes on different targets to find the very squishy people. Some people have an add-on PC that it's called Squishy Finder, and it typically it'll give you a general idea of who's going to be squishy and who's not. So that helps. But console players don't have that benefit. They need to take pokes on people and figure out, oh, this is this is our target right here, or this girl's our target. So, but how to push into the group and then how to relieve your ranks and relieve your front end, and that's very much like the Phalanx Spartan line. The front line sometimes has to be relieved because bashing the shields and pushing on the enemy is tough, and so you need to fall back. And so the second line steps forward, first line steps back, and they rest a little bit. And so, and then I've even historian wise, you read that some of the Spartans will fall all the way to the back of the line, and they'll eat an apple. They're back there just resting or whatever. So in the crazy extended fights, but how to push in and how to relieve your front line and still maintain pressure is important, and a split push is important. And so we talk about how to kind of do a split push. Let's say we jump into a group of 5, and this happened not too long ago actually in Cyrodiil. Fortunately I was with my A-team guys, and we ran into another A-team guys, and they had 2 designated healers that were really competent PvP healers. Now there's going to be some squishy people in the group, but those healers were doing a great job. It's very hard. People do a thing called covering for each other, and you're trying to burst someone down, and then everyone around them just throws a bunch of burst heals on them and a bunch of hots, right? And they're back in the fight, so you didn't get them down. Well, when you got 2 designated healers in a 5v5 fight or 6v6 fight, that's extremely hard, because you try and target one healer, the other one's still just free casting, and then everybody is built to have burst heals and hots as well. So bursting one healer down out of a group of 6 is going to be very difficult with another healer up. So what you have to do is a split push, and so half of our DPS is going to continue to burst on this guy and pressure this healer, and the other half is going to continue to burst or pressure this healer. And through that process, and sometimes you switch your groups, or sometimes you don't switch your groups to just change up pressure and change up rotation. Sometimes you switch because this healer is really low. Like, we'll notice this particular healer not breaking free from CCs, like an immobilizing snare or root, and it's because we know that their stamina is very low. So this healer is stam checked. So then we'll hit him with a hard stun, and then we'll burst the other healer down. And so split pushing sometimes is needed to kill those very organized groups. And for me, I'll jump in, take pokes on everybody. We'll figure out the best possible person to burn. And sometimes it's not even up to us to figure out who the best person to burn is, because we see someone just get really low and they're not recovering from it the way they should. You're what's for dinner. We're just going to take that person off the board. Last night I was referring to them as ads, not to be a jerk, but I'm just saying, hey, let's get the ads out before we focus on the primary target. So, and that kind of falls back to proper target selection. Push past the beefy boys and girls, get the squishies off the board or the healers off the board, and then go back and chew on the one that you're going to have to chew on a little bit longer. And so, but split push is important in the intermediate to advanced PvP sometimes, and then pinching and flanking is always important, and you get to practice that in battlegrounds. So when you go into battlegrounds and you're just making sure that your team's in, like if there's a bottleneck, and you'll see in some of the battlegrounds, like if there's some stairs going up and the whole one enemy team, green team's up here, and you're standing in the stairwell just fighting them, you need to know that red team is going to respawn and they're running to where the fight is. So you're going to get pinched on that stairwell between green and red, and so you just need to understand that. It would be way better for you to push into where green is and then even rotate around green. Even though you're putting yourself up against the wall, you're putting yourself up against the wall with the understanding that red team's getting ready to push up the stairs, and now you have pinched green team just because you moved properly, you know. And hopefully your squad's able to handle or commit to fighting green outright just to reposition to pinch them and wipe them and then turn around and wipe red team. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So um, recognizing your power level. I did a whole video on this probably 4 years ago, and recognizing other people's power levels. When I first start working with PvPers, we break this down into 4 categories. You have your tier 1 PvPer, which is somebody that might not even be running proper PvP gear, might not be running proper rotation. They're coming from a PvE environment, and some PvE gear, proc sets and stuff like that works really well in PvP. So it's not so much that, it's just that they're using the wrong abilities, because PvE isn't about burst damage, it's about sustained damage over time, and maintaining pressure and a very high level of damage over time, multiple damage over time effects on a target. You can make PvP about dot pressure and something like that, but it just functions a little differently. Mostly PvP is about burst damage, and that requires you to use different abilities than you would normally. I run into this a lot when I'm doing Infinite Archive versus PvP. Infinite Archive is it's PvE, and that your damage needs to be focused on PvE type damage, but it's PvP in the fact that you need to be able to survive once you get arcs 3 and above, because things start to be able to one-shot you and things like that, and there's mechanics involved, and your situational and positioning starts to become more important. And so you'll learn, even in Infinite Archive, some PvP aspects and how to survive outnumbered and stuff if you approach it like this is a training session for me. So your level 1s don't have really, they're at the beginning of their journey. Level 2s are recognizes they might have a PvP build on, and they are starting to understand their rotation, and they're starting to understand how to CC, hard stun, or immobilize, root, or snare people. They're just now getting a grasp on these things. They're aware of it. They're perfecting it. And so these people, you'll run into them in battlegrounds, and they'll put up a fight, not a great fight, but they're fighting you, and you'll beat them if you're an intermediate to advanced. You'll beat them, but they're at least out there doing the thing, right? And then your intermediate to advanced, your level 3 PvPer is somebody that has a full grasp of their burst rotation, and they have a full grasp of their healing and buff maintenance and everything. They understand positionally where to be, where not to be. They understand how to make fights resource fights, and they understand. They have a great understanding thing. I would say most of the advanced or very skilled PvPers that you run into are going to be the tier 3 PvPer, and then we have the top tier, and the top tier was like relegated to the 1vxers, not the run VXers, but the 1vxers, and the 1vxers can fight outnumbered, and that's what they do all day every day. Now, something to know about your tier 4 is they're tier 4 because they're wearing the most meta. They have fine-tuned everything. They've min-maxed their build, their rotation, their everything, and it is geared towards 1vxing and fighting outnumbered. Their single target burst is off the charts. It's very hard to manage to survive through it. They're running so much proc cheese that they are killing large numbers of people all at once, right? Think Vicious Death paired with Plague Break, and 20 people just got killed because they don't know any better, right? So, but that number, your tier 4, is it's a dying breed. because proc sets provide so much free damage, free healing. So now even your 1vxers can be threatened by a group of 5 intermediate or beginner PvPers that are wearing certain proc sets. It's just the amount of extra free damage, free healing that makes it hard to overcome. And so they are out there. I think Nolan Kirchhoff's a great example. If you just watch his live streams, if he's still streaming, he's out there 1vxing or small grouping, and he'll be one of the first people to admit it's really hard to 1vx now. It's very hard to 1vx now because of the amount of free damage, free healing in the game. And he's winning some of the biggest dueling tournaments and stuff like that, so on an individual level, he's very skilled. So very few people are a tier 4, and it's a dying breed. So the last thing is, and we've talked about it a little bit, 'cause we've covered a lot of things, and some people, they'll just be like, it's a bunch of rambling, and it's like, whatever, dude, then this video wasn't for you. But proc sets versus max stat and sustain. I always recommend for new PvPers that they try and avoid the proc sets, the free damage and free healing, so that way they get a feel for what it's like to have to heal for themselves and have to line up the burst and line up their damage for themselves. That lesson is actually the lesson that's the secret sauce. That's the secret sauce. To progress quicker in PvP, to get better on an individual level, you need to be lining up your burst. You need to be maintaining your heals. You need to be doing this stuff. It tightens up your game. Tightens up your PvP prowess, your ability to fight, right? Once you get to a certain point, then I say go with the meta stuff. You already shown that you can fight outnumbered, manage your resources, and you know how and where to move. Because of that, now let's start putting you in the most meta stuff and amp up your damage, amp up your healing, and let's get you to a tier 3 or above, right? And I think that is the secret sauce, and it's one of the most important aspects that is highly overlooked, and probably it's just nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it. Free damage, free healing from proc sets is a lot of fun. I run thematic builds and I want to do a lot of fun, really cool stuff. I can afford to do that because I've gone through my paces in PvP. But if you're a new PvPer that doesn't understand target selection, doesn't understand how to maintain your buffs, doesn't understand how to fight outnumbered, maintain your resources, or where to stand or where to be, or any of this stuff, and you throw on proc sets, you will kill people. Correction, the proc sets will kill people, which was initiated by you pushing one button. Congratulations. But you're not getting any better at PvP. So while you might see that you went 9 and 5 in a battleground, you're still not progressing in PvP. So what I recommend for new PvPers that are truly wanting to get better, take the proc sets off, put max stat builds on, go to no CP, which is another thing too. Champion points, and some people will be like, well, I earned those champion points, I'm gonna use them. Well, that's great if you like getting hit with 12k ults right into 20k spec bows, and you want to get hit with a 15k overload, and you want to get hit with, because CP allows these intermediate to advanced people to really lean into the damage. And so if you're still learning all these things we're talking about and having to go against people that are using proc sets and also have an extra 20 to 40% damage output through champion points, that's not an atmosphere that's conducive of learning. You're setting yourself up for failure. Right? And so what we see a lot is people going to CP Cyrodiil because that's where, quote unquote, the fights are, or that's where my guild goes or whatever, and you're setting yourself up for the hard road. That's going to be a long time of getting sent back to base, or putting yourself in extreme conditions, exposing yourself to extreme conditions, when you could, right now you can go to no CP, no proc, and just enjoy the science or the art of fighting, right? Unfortunately, here in a month, they're going to be adding proc sets to no CP Cyrodiil. So no CP Cyrodiil will be just like Battlegrounds. So we're not going to have that first stop for new PvPers that wasn't even properly used as a first stop, by the way. Nobody was telling everyone, and guilds weren't telling people, hey, where you really should be, or where we should be to have the most amount of fun PvP and engaging fights without free damage and free healing. I can actually live longer and fight longer and learn more, is no CP, no proc. It was underutilized, in my opinion, because ZOS didn't brand it or build it as that. And in my opinion, based off of their developer notes, to better streamline people from Battlegrounds to Cyrodiil or Battlegrounds to IC, we're adding procs to no CP again. They'll do that because yes, it doesn't change the rules, but it also sells their DLC, which is another whole rant. But sustainable business model, we get it, but it sells their DLC because now you need those proc sets, and so they wouldn't take it on themselves to educate PvPers that this is where you should start out at. It'll give you the best opportunity to live longer and learn to fight, and then start using the proc sets in these other locations. Is what it is. These are all conversations that we have with new PvPers. So, okay, if you disagree with anything in this video, feel free to comment on it. But I'm telling you right now that I've been training PvPers for 4 years. And I'm not saying that I'm wrong. I'm just telling you that based off of 4 years plus of PvP training experience, this has been my experience. And you cannot say that that's not true or that didn't happen, because this has all happened. These are all experiences. This is exactly what's going on in the PvP training space right now. But if you want to add something constructive to it, or add to the training process, or bring something positive to it, I totally, absolutely, please do that. Also, if you've trained with me and you've had a positive experience from that, I would love for you to share a story in this. If you're still here and listening, share a story in the comments of your PvP experiences. So if you're looking for PvP training, Grimsforge Gaming, we have a Discord, and I'll have to reshare that Discord link, I'm sure, for some people. But let's get you in. Let's get you into Discord. Have conversations. See what you want to be when you grow up. What direction you want to go in PvP. What class. What play style. And let's get you there. Let's get good together. Right. That's all I got. Thanks. Bye.